Okay, hi everyone. I think we'll still see a few more people trickling in as we get started, but to not delay, I'll start by introducing myself. I'm Allegra. I'm the marketing manager at the Paideia Institute, and I will be moderating this webinar today. Um, and just before we get started, I'd like to mention two things just for Zoom etiquette purposes. Um, if you are able to, we really appreciate it if you can keep your video on so that the speaker can feel like they're interacting with some actual humans while they're speaking. That's always appreciated. And if you could also um, keep your microphone muted until the end. We will have a Q&A session when we wrap up, but it's helpful if we can keep all of that for the end of the lecture. So without further ado, it is my immense pleasure to introduce my colleague, Aminata Hughes, who joined the Paideia Institute as our outreach manager in 2021. And she will tell you everything you need to know about what outreach means at Paideia, what it means for the field of classics, and everything she does here, and give you a little bit more information about her own background in the classics and how she came to do this kind of work. So, Aminata, you can take it away.
All right. Hello, everyone. Good morning, or rather, good afternoon. Welcome to the talk. It's titled Outreach Opportunities for Latin Teachers and Students. And thank you, Allegra, for that wonderful introduction. So my name is Aminata Hughes. I have been with Paideia for the past 3 years now. I got into Latin through my high school, the Brooklyn Latin School, where I studied Latin for 4 years. Um, I I fell in love with Latin when I got a perfect score on the National Latin exam in my freshman year, and from there it was like a love story. However, I did end up majoring in history because our classics department at my university, St. Peter's University, was unable to continue. So I ended up majoring in classical civilization, sorry, majoring in history, minoring in classical civ and secondary education at St. Peter's. From there, I got my bearings in the education world as a substitute teacher. I did some student teaching, and I also taught English abroad in Japan for a year. And then I found my way here at Paideia. And so I'm going to give you guys a little bit more background on what outreach actually is, and what I do here before diving into our outreach, our teaching literacy with Latin program in depth. So these are a few of our programs. Our main one is teaching literacy with Latin, which is an after school Latin program that allows volunteers who are typically high school aged students to go into their communities to teach elementary school students, elementary and middle school students Latin using our curriculum, um, ICORA. So that's one. Um, our other program is our Rome Prize, which sends three students from uh, underprivileged classical high schools to Rome. So here I am pictured with a student actually from the Brooklyn Latin School, which is one of our Rome Prize schools. And they get a full tuition, covered full flights, and college counseling and SAT tutoring when they return home. Uh, Our other program is our institutional memberships, which include high schools, both high schools and universities, including NYU. Um, we, help their students with applying for our fellowships. They help sustain our programs and help us do like the amazing outreach work that we love to do. And our final program is our teacher placement, which is our brand new program, which is helping Latin teachers look for new positions, and Latin schools that teach Latin or are looking for Latin teachers, um, find teachers. So we're quite excited about this one, and these are our outreach programs. So the outline for this talk today is, more about our Teaching Literacy with Latin program. So we're going to talk about how teaching literacy with Latin has grown over the past decade. We're going to talk about how teaching literacy with Latin has been used to bolster Latin programs in different schools. And we're going to talk about how you, yes, you, can implement teaching literacy with Latin in your community. All right. So teaching literacy with Latin was originally called ICORA, and it was an after-school program that was started in 2013 um, at a one-room schoolhouse called Stillwaters, which is where we get our name. And so we have been running for the past decade. We give high school volunteers the tools that they need to, create their own Latin programs for elementary and middle school students. We have been running all over the world. So we've had sites in South Korea, we've had sites in China, we've had sites in the UK. Um, and, we, encourage the students to be flexible with where they set up their sites. So for example, this is an image from one of our sites in Great Neck, and this was held at a library. This site, I think, was part of a church group. This is an image from our Stillwater site, so that's might give you a different idea of that might give you an idea of how flexible and diverse these sites can be. Most of the lessons are 45 minutes to an hour. There's a teacher's manual that's included. So these kids, if they've never had teaching or tutoring experience, it's very easy to pick it up. In fact, we don't require any background in Latin to be able to run this site. So we've actually had English teachers use our teaching literacy with Latin program as a way to introduce some classics into like an English classroom. We also offer summer grants. So let's say kids want to or volunteers want to run these sites as a summer camp. We give away 10 grants of $100 each so that they can use it towards like buying materials or securing space. And so we've had some very interesting sites come from that as well. So this is by the numbers. We have about 20 sites running this year, which are not does not include our summer sites. The average attendance is about 7 students, 7.24, I think it was, at each site. And across the past few years, we've had an average of about 150 students across all of our sites per year. So I think that's an amazing reach for especially a language that is not, um, it's not a major language of study. And, we're running these in public schools, running these in like communities where students would never have had the chance to, even be introduced to this language. So I think this is quite amazing. Um, so these are different ways in which our teaching literacy with Latin program can be used to bolster, your own Latin program. Um, so there's general inspiration. For example, I mentioned our summer sites in South Korea. So I had a volunteer named Kelly Sung, who's run a site with us for the past 2 to 3 years in her home country of South Korea. And just by running that, she's been able to inspire students to take Latin that would never have taken it in the past. And then you also have students who are or volunteers who are more targeted in their approach. So I had a volunteer this summer named Reed Roberts who specifically targeted fifth, sixth, and seventh graders in his district because he knew that they would be selecting their, their language of study at this point. Um, and he wanted to gain, not only students for the Latin program, but also students who'd be interested in joining the JCL. And so during his summer camp, he spent a full day of just like going through, um, what does it mean to be in the JCL? What events do we do? What's Kurtamen? Different things like that. So this program is very good at, generally, raising the profile of the, of the Latin courses at your schools. We also have avoided this one thing in the past, but I think I'm going to be a little bit more open to it. But we are now encouraging people to start programs at their own lower schools. So let's say you have a lower school and an upper school, and the high schoolers maybe take Latin, but the elementary school students don't. We're now encouraging sites or volunteers to volunteer with their own lower school students in order to bolster the numbers um, of students who are taking Latin in the program. So the reason why we discourage this is because we'd really love for to introduce Latin to students who may never get the chance to study the language. But we see that because it is easy to get started where you are, um, this can inspire the administration at the school to want to expand it out into the community. And there are also immediate material benefits to increasing the amount of students who are electing to take Latin. Let's say you participate in our ICORA program as a sixth grader. In 2 to 3 years, you will be like choosing to take Latin as a ninth grader. And so that's also a positive. And one of our most exciting ventures is starting Latin programs from complete scratch. And so this is a case study. We have been doing cold outreach to schools across several different cities. So I've personally emailed every elementary and middle school in New York City, Philadelphia, and the Boston metro area and the Washington D.C. metro area, trying to start our Latin programs. And we've actually gotten a lot of success doing this. And one of the schools that we reach out to is a school called Pathways College Preparatory School in Jamaica, Queens. And so this is a school that is um, they serve a very, marginalized community, but they also are, very interested in giving opportunities to their students. So they allow dual enrollment at um, the the college community college level. They are trying to apply to be an IB school, and they worked with us on their bridge program. So they wanted to take
So,
their
basically when the meat turns gray, that means it's cooked. Um, Make sure to like,
oh, Amity. Sorry. That was a wonderful segue, I guess, or um, break. So
Surprise intervention.
surprise intervention. Yes, definitely make sure you cook your meat so that it's fully done. But they wanted to start a program for their uh, rising ninth graders. And so we had four volunteers come in from the city, and they worked with the school to implement our summer camp program. Um, so the students were doing Latin feasts, they were like learning derivatives, getting them ready for high school. And they loved that program so much that they decided to, hire a Latin teacher and start a Latin program. And we're very excited about that, and we hope to work with them again um, in the years to follow. So this is another perfect idea of things, you know, of a way you can use Latin to, or teaching literacy with Latin to bolster um, not only Latin programs that already exist, but ones that have yet to exist. Um, and the benefits of studying Latin, as I'm sure you guys know, can be felt across disciplines. So recent pedagogical research shows that in the first year of Latin instruction, students' ability to read English is improved by 150% compared to students without Latin, and that 80% of Latin students score better on standardized tests compared to their peers who don't take Latin. And we know that because of the Romance language connection, 80% of Spanish vocabulary derives directly from Latin, and about 60% of English. I think we were having this kind of debate actually earlier if it was 60 or 40% of Latin derives from English, or English derives from Latin. But I've heard 60, so I'm going with 60. Um, and so our curriculum is actually ingenious because it includes not only English and Latin, but also Spanish. So it helps students bridge the connection. You know, if you're a native Spanish speaker or if you are a native English speaker, start bridging those connections between the languages. And I also read that they did a study about on 4,000 students in Philadelphia, um, who had 20 minutes of Latin instruction, and they were actually a grade ahead of their um, peers in reading. And so these are some ways that, you know, not only does the Latin instruction benefit the Latin courses, but it can like give you a benefit in all of your like courses. You know, we are very intentional about the fact that this is a literacy um, curriculum and not necessarily a Latin curriculum. And so, you know, we're teaching kids parts of speech, we're teaching kids um, subject verb agreement, those things that they may be learning in English, we want to double down. And I'm sure, and I know for a fact that Latin has knockoff benefits in the STEM as well. And there may be some exciting things in that realm coming soon. Little teaser there. So this is we've heard about the benefits of, you know, teaching literacy with Latin. We've heard, you know, about the history behind teaching literacy with Latin. Now let's get into how to start a teaching literacy with Latin site. Um, Mind you, I have no idea about tarot cards. I just picked these because they sounded vaguely vaguely appropriate, but we've divided it into three phases. So there's the volunteer phase, the planning phase, and the active phase. Um, and I'll go into detail about each of these phases. So the volunteer phase begins when someone applies through our website. Then I reach out to them with our list of materials. So we have flyers, we've got email, templates that you can use to reach out to schools. I always encourage students to call people on the phone. It's really all about taking the initiative and thinking outside the box. So the hardest part about this phase is securing a space and students. Um, Teaching literacy with Latin has been held in libraries, in schools, in community centers, in public spaces like backyards or parks. And the more you're willing to think outside the box, the easier it will be to actually encounter or start a site. Um, I feel that a lot of students or a lot of our student volunteers get stuck at this point, because it is a little bit difficult for kids, like high school students, to, you know, make those connections and, you know, really feel confident in taking the initiative. You know, I've had to encourage a lot of my high school volunteers to call the main office, like just You know, people are like, oh, I don't want to bother anyone. Like, no, you get in there and you bother people. So I really believe that teachers are very key at this point because you can turn your Latin class into a service learning course. So I know in my high school we were required to do community service hours, and this would be a wonderful way to get kids who are passionate about the classics to volunteer. And you can use you as a teacher can maybe use your own connections with teachers, or you can use your own pull with admin, or you can even step in as an adult to make the connections on behalf of interested students. You can volunteer to, you know, even chaperone students or lead the course. And so I find that when an adult is involved, either as like a, you know, if an adult is involved, I find the success of the program a lot higher than when students trying to do it all by themselves. The next phase is a planning phase. So kids tend to get stuck here as well. Like um, this is all about answering those pesky logistical questions like when and where will you start? What days of the week are you planning to host your site? Where in the building are you going to host? And so we do get like a ton of sometimes you get stuck into email, you know, the email soup where nothing is really moving forward. Um, and that's a place where people can be stuck. So it really helps to be patient and persistent here in the planning phase. A little bit of alliteration. And our active phase is when you finally, you know, have a start date. That's when I consider you active. So you're meeting every week with your site and you are going through our curriculum. Mind you, there's no strict requirement to finish our ICORA curriculum. Um, but you know, you're actively meeting with the kids. And so some other requirements we have of this phase is we require a site page on our website that showcases each site, the work that you guys like the volunteers are doing, a little bit of a profile for them, which I find helps when students are applying to colleges. You can look and show people like, hey, this is exactly what I've been doing. This is a nice like this is a nice showcase of all the work that I've been doing. Um, and we require students to keep a weekly site log so that we're able to keep track of exactly what they're doing. You know, what lesson are you on? Um, how long did it take you to get to this lesson? How long are you hosting the meetings? How many students are attending each week? Um, and as I've gone on in the years, we've also been encouraging students to plan for next year. So if you're a senior, who's going to take over for you in the fall? You know, are you a freshman? If you have sports in the fall, who's going to, you know, are you going to find somebody else who would like to do this? Um, and some other exciting things happening here. We might be working on getting a diagnostic so that we can have very granular and a little, we can have more granular and scientific data about our sites. So I think that was a lot of me talking. I will open it up to Q&A as moderated by my good friend Allegra.
Yeah, and since there aren't that many of us, I think if you just want to unmute yourself and ask your question or put your question in the chat, that's fine. We don't need to raise hands.
Thank you so much for presenting. It was very fascinating. I'm definitely interested in this. So my background is I'm a student at Miami University, and part of my program, my Latin teaching program, is to go into a school and give a weekly Latin course. The kids are loving it. I'm having a blast. How do we get started? How do I become affiliated with IQuora? Now, one maybe important piece of information is that technically I'm supposed to end like my affiliation with my school district this semester. I have another year or so to go. Um,
Mm.
but I've really been thinking prior to learning about this presentation, I've been thinking about extending that Latin class beyond this semester.
Yeah, that's a great question. It's a very simple matter of going to our website, and it should be uh, paideinstitute.org/teaching literacy with Latin. Um, I guess Allegra, if you want to put that in the chat, if you can, and then signing up, and I will send you all of the material. And so, if you'd like to continue with the school that you're already you're already teaching in, I guess outside of your existing, I guess, Latin course, are you studying to be a teacher? Is this like teacher observation or? Um,
Yeah, it's pretty much that. It's just
mhm,
another component. It's just another field component of
mhm,
my program. It's not student teaching, it's not
mhm,
like the proper student teaching section, but it's just
mhm,
another practicum component of my program, yes.
mhm. Yeah, once you sign up, I will send you all of the materials. We have a textbook, a teacher's manual, a songbook, and game appendix, and everything is scripted. Um, and it's just a matter of setting up your logistics and continuing on. And you're allowed to bring in fact, we encourage you to bring in any supplemental material that you may like or may have been working on yourself. And um, from there, it's your baby.
Great. So another follow-up question to that is how are we corresponding when we're doing this? Do you just hand off the iCore curriculum and I go from there?
So once you are technically an active site, do require site leaders to complete a weekly site log, and that's our main way of communicating. There's also an end of the year survey. So I periodically check on the site logs just to see, like, are you filling it out? What are you doing? If there's anything that's like exciting or noteworthy. And I'm always available to be reached via email, and I often set up um, debrief calls with students either before they've started a site or after they've begun their sites.
Thank you.
Thank you. See, someone mentioned our teacher placement service.
There's the link.
Yeah.
And we'll send around these links to everyone who RSVP'd to this lecture as well, so you have them on hand afterwards.
I just have a quick question. So are these programs normally like or is like the Icora like textbook, is it designed for like one full year or like or one semester, or can it be like a multiple year course?
So the iCore textbook is 11 units of grammar, history, and mythological lessons, or sorry, grammar, history, and cultural lessons. Um, and it's 3 lessons per unit. They don't necessarily build off of each other because they are designed for after school. So we've had students use the textbook for an entire year. Some of them have used the textbook for just a semester. Um, we, because of the nature of after school, you don't know if you're getting the same students every week. Sometimes Jimmy has to miss because he's going to a doctor's office, or maybe a kid does it one year and then doesn't do it the next. So we find that just having the textbook and going through it works very well. If you do have run into a situation where your students have gone through the textbook already, We encourage you to bring in supplemental material, or you could explore using our Latin 1 curriculum called Elementa. And so we say that iCora is like the freemium version of our premium Elementa, which is more of a traditional Latin 1 course. But yes, you can either use it via per semester or per year. And you don't have to
Okay,
go in order. Yeah. You can
thank you.
start on like, yeah, no worries. You can start at the back. You know, you can jump around, you can do other things. We allow full flexibility.
I have another question. Have you ever had anyone working in an international school attempt to implement this? And beyond IQUORA, beyond this specific program, um, could you perhaps comment on teaching, like opportunities that Paideia might offer regarding teaching classics internationally?
Hmm. So when you say international school, are you speaking specifically about schools like who, they're abroad, but they serve students that are like, students who are the children of ambassadors or children who are like, can you go more into detail about what you mean by international school?
Of course. So I'm based in the United States of America, right?
Hmm.
So schools outside of that have an English speaking curriculum that are taught in, primarily in
Hmm.
English. I'm going to be doing my student teaching component internationally, and I'm also interested in doing that beyond my program. So
Hmm.
that's, I guess I mean it broader than ambassadors and things like that.
Yeah.
So importantly, of course, not excluding that.
Wonderful. Yeah. I don't think we have actually had a site running at an international school. But because the students are primarily taught in English, it should be a very easy matter of implementing the curriculum. Um, the schools that we have had teaching literacy with Latin. So our site in South Korea, I'm pretty sure that was run in English. I'm not sure if it was necessarily a school or just like an after school or like extracurricular program that those students were in. But I think it should be very easy to implement it, as all of our course materials are in English. And sorry, what was the second part of your question?
Oh, that's pretty much. Well, if you could comment, if you have any further information regarding teaching classics abroad, particularly in the East. So, China, South Korea, Japan, anything like that, that would be greatly appreciated.
Um, Not off the top of my head, but I think if you were to apply for our teacher placement program, we're getting schools that write in all the time looking for Latin teachers. So that would be the first place I would suggest going because, if we have an opportunity that arises, we can just have you on hand and suggest you for it.
Thank
We
you.
have many students who come to our high school summer programs in Rome and Greece who come from international, like, English is the primary language spoken at schools in China and South Korea primarily. So I feel like we do have a toe in that network. So if you wanted to fill out the teacher placement form, I think we could definitely start a broader conversation with that area of global education.
Thank you so much. I'll definitely do that.
Awesome. I find that fascinating as someone who like taught for a while in Japan. If I was still over there, I'd love to implement this program just to see the cross-cultural possibilities. And I'm very excited about the students who have run programs in China and South Korea. There are a few articles on our In Medias Res publication that go into detail about their experiences that might be of interest to you.
Thank you.
Does anyone else have any questions?
I think there's a question in the chat from Mahmoud.
Okay, so because students don't consider, because how do we get, how do we let like Latin, how do we make Latin more attractive for students at the university level? Is that
Well, I think that's maybe sort of speaking to the broader mission of the Institute, right? Of keeping the classical humanities alive. I think that, a big part of our mission is sort of encouraging, as we've talked about today, encouraging younger students to take an interest in the classics and especially take ownership of classical learning and the ancient world as something that should be open to them and is fun no matter what their background is. But then for older students, ultimately, what the Paideia Institute really does at the core of its mission is to bring people to the sites where these texts and these historical events hail from and bring the language and antiquity to life through spoken and active approaches to language pedagogy, but also seeing things at the sites where they took place and really having an understanding of the ancient world as something that is remote but that can have proximity to us today as well, and that is still very much alive. So that's in a nutshell that's what we do. But of course, there's so many different ways to get involved with Paideia. Like we have self-paced online courses and free online lectures such as this one, and of course the travel programs as well. So if you are curious about learning more, we encourage you to visit the website or send us an email.
awesome? I love that answer. Can I piggyback off of that and say that we've had teaching literacy with Latin court being used with high school students. And so, depending on the level of student, it may be appropriate to start at the teaching literacy with Latin curriculum. Mind you, it is written for a fourth to eighth grade audience. So, depending on your needs, you can adapt it and use it with older students if you'd like to make it to introduce Latin as a way as in something more fun than a traditional Latin one course. But I also love what you've said, Allegra, about our general mission.
Okay, I think we have one more question um, from Teresa about volunteering or starting a new site.
Okay, so two things here. You don't necessarily need to be fluent in Latin or have a high level of Latin. We encourage volunteers to have at least one semester of high school Latin, but we've had, people who are English teachers or who, don't have any background in Latin use this program because it is all written in English and it's technically a pre-Latin course. Um, and I encourage volunteers to start something new just because depending on your location, it is a little bit tough to place a lot of people together. And so I don't want to end up in a situation where we have 5 volunteers and 5 students, even though, that has been done before and it's not the end of the world. It is possible to join on with what other people are doing, but I would encourage volunteers to find and start their own sites. Um,
All right, I think.
I'm sorry, I have a question.
Oh, there's one more question. Okay, go for it.
Apologies. So I teach Latin. I've been doing so for quite some time. Is this program appropriate for, like, let's say that I wanted to use it to run a program in my lower schools? Is that a thing that I can do? I mean, I'm sure I could find a couple of kids that wanted to run it themselves. But in a pinch, like I could do it too. That's right. Is that a thing?
Yep, you totally can do it. It's it's fully scripted, so like a Latin teacher or someone who has like a lot of teaching experience, may not need it to be as like, bop 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 bop, but no, it's fully possible to do, and we've had teachers run programs using iCora before, and you're able to adapt it to your own needs and change it and add more, take out. Um, so yeah. Um, my other, I guess, consideration is if you would be interested in our Elementa program, which is a little bit more substantial. It has 180 lessons, and you can do it during the school, or it's designed for like during the school day. You could even teach it once a week. So if you're looking for something a little bit more substantial, I might point you towards Elementa, but Icora, definitely works as well.
I'd probably only be looking for IQRA because if I'm
Mhm.
going to run, I mean, I teach a full program at the high school, but numbers, as numbers do in all Latin programs these days, are dropping. And I need to get to the littles a little bit better. So
Yeah.
if I can use something other than what I'm using up here, that'd be good. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
No worries. And I'd like to reiterate, I don't think I mentioned this before, but teaching literacy with Latin is absolutely free. It's free for schools, it's free for volunteers, and it's free for the students, which makes it very unique in the world of like after school and Latin. And it also makes it very accessible and easy to pick up. Um, so the only, I guess, associated costs that someone might run into is if you'd like to order spiral bound copies of the curriculum. We just sell them at the cost of printing. Other than that, we give you the full curriculum from day one, PDF. You can print it out and just run with it. Yep. See some movement in the chat. Do I need to start a program at a school, or would it be possible to start one somewhere like a library? Yeah, it would totally be possible to start something at a library. We have two. Oh yeah, Allegra, you answer this a bit. Yeah, off the top of my head, we had a program running at the Pelham Parkway Van Ness Library here in New York City, where I'm based. Through the New York Public Library system. And then we've also had one at the Great Neck Library. We've had one at the Bethlehem Public Library. And so library is a good place to start. The only issue that you might run into is getting a base of students to come every single week. That might be a little bit difficult, but not impossible.
Quick question. So have you had any, could we connect this with tutoring, like a one-on-one context or maybe a pod context?
I favor this more for a pod with multiple students because there are many activities, and it's really designed for like an after school program with a few kids to be able to have fun and play off of each other. Um, I think you could possibly do it in a one-to-one context. Like we've had volunteers have to do it that way just because of the numbers, but it's really not designed for a tutoring program or for one-to-one instruction.
To clarify this point just a little bit, Paideia, if you're using our curriculum, I don't believe that you can set up a tutoring relationship independently because since ICOR is governed by our nonprofit, there's some like slight legal differences between teaching a group versus teaching an individual student. But if you are interested in um, having us help you match you with a student to tutor, we partner with I mean, we call it a sister organization, but it's just our institute's president's side business. He has a classics tutoring and advising business, and he can set you up with matches there. Of course, obviously, you're free to pursue that independently, but if you are doing that through Paideia, we need to like kind of go through a slightly different channel to set up one-on-one tutoring.
That makes sense. Thank you very much.
Of course.
Could you possibly shoot me a link for that?
Absolutely. Yeah, I'll put it in the chat right now.
Thank you.
Awesome. Another thing I didn't mention is that this curriculum has a digital component. So if you were interested in, um, running it with digital resources, you can sign up that way and run it virtually if you'd like. Any other questions?
All right. Well, if that's all, thank you everyone so much for being here today. This was
Wait,
a
I have
lovely
another slide.
conversation. Oh, sorry, you have
Sorry.
another slide. Go for it.
Sorry.
Sorry. I stole your thunder.
No, that's okay. So in conclusion, sorry, but I love that. Hold that for a moment, Allegra. These are some ways to get involved. So you can apply to be a volunteer. You can start a Latin service learning course with your existing Latin classes. Please stay in touch. We have so many wonderful programs that run, travel programs, curricula that drops, telepaideia courses. Please donate and get involved. You know, our Rome Prize that sends three wonderful students to Rome and gives them free SAT tutoring and college counseling. Some of our students have gone on to colleges like Princeton and Columbia, which is amazing. And you can encourage your high school or your college or university to become an institutional member with us. So many ways to be involved and be part of the Paideia universe. Um, and I will, I guess, hand it off to Allegra now.
Thank you, Ami, for this wonderful presentation, and thank you all for being here. We will follow up with a recording of the lecture in case you want to revisit any of this information, and I'll include links to all the things that we've talked about. Yeah, it was fun to see a few familiar names in the chat as well. So have a wonderful day, everyone, and thank you.